Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review 10,000 BC. So, for this movie, I was kind of hoping there'd be a story within this film that could counteract the fact that I was like, I don't know about this movie. I don't think there's going to be any impressive visuals. So this movie really has to rely on story. And sadly enough, this movie doesn't really have either or. Doesn't have really good visuals, or really doesn't have good story either. So it's really just kind of man, this movie is so flat. And by the end of it, I'm like, man, this is some kind of boring. Man, this movie was disappointing because I was thinking, I'm like, there must be something here to just save this film. But come to find out, it feels like they didn't know where to go with this. Just, that's what it really feels like. So, here's also another thing. This movie, if not most of it, is kind of in a number of different languages that don't have any translation for, which is great. On top of that, we have, sometimes when people are talking, it's freaking gibberish, and I'm like, I don't want to take the time to decipher what the heck this means. The mountain of the gods, and the head of the snake, and I'm like, okay, whatever this means. I get it, this is a period of time where people don't speak the best. But when we get right in the beginning of this movie, the beginning of this movie is going to tell you, what you're going to get into. And when they start, plopping out that dialogue in the beginning of this, I'm like, what? I'm just... Here's also a thing. Why does Delay and Evelyn, why do they need to have a younger version of themselves in the beginning of this film? Does it matter? No. So you purposely give a younger character of a person for a number of seconds within the film when you could have really just had the two actors you already cast as these roles. You didn't need a younger version of these characters, and you really could have went on and been fine to have Delay's dad leave at any point in this movie. It would have been fine. Delay could have been way older, and his dad still could have left. It wouldn't have made a lick of difference. He could have left at any time, and no one would have cared. But yeah, so here's also the thing. I feel like this movie has good CGI until one point. One point we have, and this is of course the clip that Netflix is to use to sell you this movie. We have this tiger that is to come and be where Delay is and Tick Tick are around these. I think they're the Naku, the tribe. The Sabretooth comes walking in, and then Delay is like, well, hey, you should remember me, I saved you. And so the Sabretooth is looking so bad in this scene, but every other animal that's done in CGI throughout this movie looks good. But that one scene is the one thing that they try to sell you on this movie, and the CGI is not that good. They should have used a way different scene to try to sell you on this movie. Because when you're looking at this Sabretooth, you're like, man, that looks rough. So that should not have been a scene to sell the film. But it is what it is. So, plus I think a lot of this was just a rush to get this thing out. Because they're like, man, let's just chuck this thing out there. Because, this movie is rough. So yeah, so the grading of this is that the movie is just bad. It's bad, it's flat, it's just so flat. It feels like there's stuff going on at the beginning, but man, does it just drag until by the end of the movie, I'm not even interested in the big massive battle at the end. I'm like, I don't really care. Like, you need to have sold me on this movie as a whole to really get me interested in the ending of it. And I'm just like, battle, 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 random, whatever. So, teeing it up, what is this movie about? So, at first, it seems we have Delay, who eventually, when he becomes older in this movie, is to go on and become this hunter who's going after these mammoths, who are actually to be called most of the time to be mammoths. And so we have Delay, who's hunting after these mammoths, and eventually we come to find out that there is a cluster of these men that have a warlord and a number of other guys. And so they're stealing from every tribe. They're stealing a number of guys from a number of tribes so that way they can go on and build this massive pyramid. Because we have this guy who's to just be called this almighty and that he's some kind of god. And so, for some reason or another, we have to go on and have Delay, who's going to try and eventually overthrow this almighty and these people, to go on and get his woman back, but then to also just overthrow these people. And then maybe instead of going on and living in the places and the scholars that they do, maybe they'll just all live in these pyramids after they rebuild them, because, yeah. Anyways, but all of this, like, talk, there is so much about, like, prophecies and all these different things, and how we have certain people that are saying, oh no, this guy is going to get this spear today, oh no, this is going to happen today, and we just have it to where, like, we have, like, the kind of the future is not set kind of Terminator thing, where it's like, well, hey, like, there are many different kind of destinies, there are many different kind of prophecies, so maybe this one is just not the one that's correct for today. So, like, maybe we should just kind of go on and make our own destiny. Fate is what we make for ourselves, kind of thing. Terminator, I'm quoting Terminator now, but still, it is what it is. So, with that said, I've spoken for far too long about this movie. It's bad, but it's currently on Netflix, so it's the convenient factor of, like, oh, hey, let's check this movie out, because I kind of always wanted to see it. There was tempting times for me to want to see this movie. At least a part of this was in English, because I know the whole Apocalypto Mel Gibson movie, like, that isn't in English. And so I was kind of, like, torn. Like, I always wanted to kind of want to see, like, Apocalypto, but I'm like, I don't want another subtitled movie. Like, I know Passion of the Christ, I watched all of that, but, like, I'm just like, I don't want to watch, like, another, like, I've watched too many movies that, like, the whole entire thing is subtitled out, kind of like Pan's Labyrinth, and I'm just not interested in kind of having to go on and do those kind of movies again. Plus, also, I would just like, just dub a film, just dub a thing. That'd be great. We have the technology. It should be done. But anyways, so with that said, let's double five this bad boy up. Let's just go into spoilers, because eventually I'll get into whatever this movie was. So let's go into spoiler time. It's about that time we get to spoil this movie. Man, bleh. It's a bad movie, but I just feel just so, like, if only I could have, like, had a better movie out of this. I would love to want to say, like, this one was definitely, like, a positive thing. It's frustrating. It's disappointing. So with that said, let's go into the beginning of this. So, Delay is to be a young kid, and his father is to leave him to go F off somewhere, and eventually we'll find out where he s off. And he is to Delay's father is to have this certain kind of bone bracelet thing on him, and eventually we'll find later on that Delay is to re-find this wooden bracelet thing on another person, and is to ask like, hey, where did that guy go and get that? Because I want to get one for myself at some store. Like, did he get it at Walmart? Was it Target? It's a joke. So Delay is to be a young kid and is to find out that this girl named Evelet is to be this blue-eyed girl. I guess they've never really seen a blue-eyed girl, so ooh, wow, how unique. She looks just like all the other characters, but her eyes are blue. So if I go in there with my blue eyes, be like, hey, he's unique. Anyways, so come to find out Evelet was to be called this name because it seems that she is to be special. And they have a whole like name and reasoning for why they call her Evelet. So come to find out Evelet is to have told this clan that her people were to be killed or to be taken by the four-legged demons, which are really just men that come with horses and eventually just collect all these people because they're just stronger than they are. So with this warlord and a number of other guys who eventually will come to this place also to collect their people. So we now have time passing, and so Delay is to be old enough to eventually become a hunter, and so Delay is to go on with a number of these guys to try to find the lead Mammoth, which is a mammoth, and is to go and take this thing down. And I'm like, so you have a group of guys, they're all straight up just taking down one animal and one animal alone. I'm like, man, these guys aren't going to be really all that productive. No wonder that these probably guys died off so quickly. Because they have a whole group of people, a whole ton of guys, that can barely get down one mammoth without hurting some folks. And I'm just like, man, like, they should have figured out some way to go on and figure out something to try and take down a lot more mammoths. Because I get it, like, they probably only need so much food, but still, like, to have one mammoth last the whole, like, season for a whole massive group of people, I don't know. So we have Delay that is to be said that Karen is to be the chosen guy, the prophesied guy who's going to take down this mammoth himself, and he'll be the guy who ends up getting the white spear, the hunter spear. And also that Karen will go on and also get Evelet when he gets that spear. So Delay is like, no, like, I want this. Like, I want to do this. And because I want Evelet. Like, me and her, Roy's the outsiders, because Delay, when he was a younger kid, all the kids hated him because of his dad leaving the group. And so everybody, like, when they would be like high-fiving, yeah, I did this, like, they would bump like these shoulders or whatever, or bump their forearms. And Delay is like, hey, yeah, let's bump forearms. And the kid's like, no, I'm not going to bump your forearm. I don't like you. No, you're the outside of the group. Go away. Goodbye. And in some, I'm paraphrasing here, but you know. So Delay goes on and meets with Evelyn. I'm like, oh, like, you're an outsider. So am I. So that's great. We're going to be the best friends. So now, Delay is to go off, try to be the first to get this Mammoth. And so they're chasing, they're kind of racing to where the Mammoths are. And so they're kind of sliding in the ground. They're trying to, like, slowly and quietly figure out who is the lead Mammoth. It's like, who is it? Which one is it? They're sliding underneath the ground, hoping that they don't get stomped by one of these elephants. So we have Tick Tick, who's kind of the oldest out of everybody, who's saying, like, okay, it's this one. So Tick Tick is to scare this one elephant so that way they all rush into a certain direction, because this is to be the lead one, and when this lead one goes, then everyone else will. So they're trying to herd all these mammoths into one direction, and trying to funnel them all into this one area to where they can pick one of them off. So what ends up happening is they funnel these mammoths, and then eventually they end up getting the lead, and they end up having this one trap set, and they try to net this mammoth, and the net ends up backfiring, the net ends up breaking, and so we have it to where all of the hunters, all the tribe, they're all jumping onto this net trying to, like, hope that their weight is going to slow this thing down. And so what ends up happening is everybody's just going to jump off because they're like, F it, man, we're going to die if this thing keeps dragging us. And Delay can't jump off because his arm is caught in this net. So now Delay is the only one left out of everybody. And so now the mammoth is to get out of this net. Delay is trying to still get his arm out of this net. So the mammoth is now, like, still dragging this guy around a little bit here and there. But then eventually what happens is Delay is to try and stab into this thing. Doesn't work. Delay is to grab this other spear and is to use a like a thing of rock to kind of wedge into, and then we have it where the mammoth ends up just falling right on the spear, and it goes through him a lot further and kills him off. And so now Delay is now stuck under this mammoth, this Malik, and the guys are like, hey, what happened? And so they end up pulling Delay out, and they're like, oh man, he did it, he ends up getting the white spear, good for him. And everybody all of a sudden just accepts him now, because, like, he ended up killing this mammoth, which no one else could. So they're like, okay, like, finally we'll accept you as one of us. You're not freaking Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or anything like that. So we have Delay, who goes and is now with Evelyn. But then Delay is to confess to certain people. It's like, well, technically, I didn't kill with the spear and the mammoth. Like, really, like, the mammoth just kind of fell on this thing and it died that way. And Tick Tick and Evelyn are like, seriously? Like, just, come on, just accept the white spear. Like, you'll get Evelyn, you'll be happy. Like, why are you going on and taking this back? You were the only one there. You have had to have killed it either way. But Delay is tempted to go on and turn him into a spear, and so this is right around the time where we have the men or the four-legged demons come in and start taking people. And so a number of people end up getting taken. Evelyn is one of them. And so Delay now has to go on and try to get his people back, and especially try to go after Evelyn. So we have Delay, Tick Tick, and a number of guys going after these people, this warlord and his guys. So we go on, and a number of people are to be collected by a number of random tribes. We eventually have it to where Baku is to talk to one of the other tribes, like guys that are kind of the same age as him. He's like, oh, like, who are you? And he's like, oh, I'm Tuda. It's like, well, I'm Baku. It's like, oh, well, I'm Tuda. It's like, okay, all right, like, that must be what your name is. So we have Delay and Tick Tick that are to eventually go and meet a number of other tribes. They go on and meet with the Naku, and at one point we have Delay who accidentally eats one of these red peppers. He's like, oh my god, this is freaking hot. So, come to find out, Delay's father had worked with the Naku, and Delay is like, really? Like, wow, like that's crazy. So like that's so, like, so he's trying to like backpedal and try to figure out where his dad technically was. So Delay is working with the Naku, and so they decide to go on with Delay and Tick Tick to eventually have them, like, on their travels, start meeting up with a number of other tribes. Like, there's so many that we kind of have one guy that steps up, Handu, I think his name is, and he ends up being like the speaker for all of these other tribes. And they're like, hey man, like, do you want to kind of team up? Like, we're all doing the same mission here, so like, come on and just kind of team up with us. We have at one point where Delay is trying to make some goofy joke that the Naku leader is telling Delay, it's like, dude, like, this guy doesn't joke. Like, this guy doesn't, like what you're saying here is just gonna be like a waste on him. And Delay is like, well, all right. So we go on, and we have all these guys that are now tying together. And so now we go on, and we have one of these tribesmen who are telling Delay about this mountain built by the gods, and eventually finding the head of the snake. And I'm like, what the is going on? Who's the what now? Head of the who now? What the? So Delay is to go on and start figuring out that possibly the way that the moon is could probably help them figure out where to go. And so they end up start following the moon. And so eventually this leads them to the mountain built by gods, and eventually that's going to lead them to the head of the snake, because we find out this massive pyramid that all these guys are starting to build. So while these guys are building this massive pyramid, we go on and have it to where the Almighty is to show himself to all these people while they're all working. So come to find out, we have the Almighty that is to be looking at all these people, and he's like, you know what? I think we need to make an example. Like, I want one person to be sacrificed. And one of the people that end up actually getting sacrificed is a guy named Moha. So Moha ends up getting killed. He ends up just getting tossed off this pyramid, and he smacks against this thing, and he ends up getting killed. And so, oh, we also have to get to certain pieces also. I'll get to that in a second. So we have the other men, like to Kibu, who is to see Moha dead, and he's like, okay, I'll have to go on until delay when he gets here that Moha was killed. Oh well, like stuff happens. So now let's get to some other things. So we had it at one point where both Delay and Tick Tick were just by themselves, because eventually we had the warlord who came by and started grabbing other like people that were hunters from Delay and Tick Tick. So we had just Delay and Tick Tick who were left at one point before they made it to the Deku, or the Naku. And so Delay was to go on and was to chase after this like these little animals, because Tick Tick was sick and he was like bleeding from his leg. So Delay, when he was to run off to get and stab into these animals with the spear, all of a sudden he falls into this massive hole. This massive hole is to have all these birds and all these crazy things going on, as well as there being a saber-tooth that Delay was to save from drowning, and Delay could not kill this saber-tooth, so he decides to save him. And he's like, hey, like, you better not kill me if I save you. So the saber-tooth goes on and is to look at Delay, but then runs off and just kind of jumps into this cave. And so we have it to where Delay has a kind of tree part big enough to where he can climb out of this place also. We had it where also Delay and Tick Tick and a number of the hunters earlier were trying to go after their people when the warlord was trying to take them. And while they were chasing after these warlords, there was also these Terra birds that were in the mix between these people, and some of the warlord people got killed by these Terra birds, but then also we had some of the hunters that kind of had to scramble away from these Terra birds. They kind of look like llamas to me, but they're kind of like almost kind of dinosaurish kind of birds of sorts. So they would kind of look like a raptor / llama. It's kind of weird looking, but the definitive name for these things are Terra birds, or Terra birds. Birds, whatever. Anyways, so at least I got that out of the way also. Because I knew I was going to probably forget about it, because I was like, okay, that doesn't feel important enough, but like the Terra birds were kind of cool, so let's cover it. So, I know it's probably confusing, but either way, like, I'm just plopping out stuff that happens in this film, because this movie is very a flat film. So, and I'm kind of backpedaling, because I'm almost at the end anyways, for most of this. So, and we also, when Delay and Tick Tick were with the Naku, we have a saber-toothed tiger that is to meet up again with Delay in the horrible CGI'd moment where Delay is to look at the saber-toothed tiger and say, hey, like, you should remember me, like, I saved your life kind of thing, so, like, don't come on and kill us now. And so the saber-tooth kind of looks at all these people, kind of circles around, and then he leaves. I'm like, what was the point of that? What was the point? Like, we don't have the saber-tooth come back and just like, hey man, let me help you guys out later on, because now I'm your friend, I'm your buddy. No! The Sabretooth seriously just kind of comes in just to circle around people and then leaves. And I'm like, are you kidding me? What was the point of the Sabretooth? Like, you would have thought maybe Delay would have just all of a sudden just, like, that would have been, like, his, like, animal that he was riding on to just help all these people to, like, but no, they did nothing with it. What was the point of that? I'm so confused why that happened. It was a waste. And, like, plus it's also poorly CGI'd. So you could have nixed that scene because it looks worse than all of the others. It makes no sense also. What was the point of the saber-toothed tiger? I don't get it. Moving on. So, we also have where the other... like, where the hunters were. With Delay and Tick-Tick, like, their tribe. We have the Old Mother. The Old Mother is to be this kind of witch character who is to feel or sense a bunch of things going on. She's the person who's wielding all these prophecies and saying that everybody's going to be like who they are going to be, and eventually things don't happen quite as she says, and so like can't really rely on what the Old Mother is saying, but it is what it is. So all of a sudden the Old Mother, that mother, is going on, and she's like, she stopped eating, she stopped drinking, like she is basically withering away. And so a lot of times back at that tribe, she is like getting cold, and she's kind of, she's like the reaction of what the actual hunter guys are actually doing. They have to keep panning back to her for her to be living the exact same kind of events that these hunters are through their journey. And so eventually, towards the end, Old Mother is to be like alive long enough so that way she can go on and die so someone else can live by the end of this film. And I'll get into that when we get into towards the end of this movie, when I can finally get to all this pyramid stuff in this big battle, because I want to get to that. So we have Delay with all of his people finally making it to this pyramid, because I think I've covered everything else within this film. So Delay makes it to the pyramid, is to meet up with all the people who are basically slaves that are going on and trying to put together this pyramid forcibly. And so Delay is to go on and tell these guys, like, hey, we're coming for you, and like we're gonna have all these guys kind of group up together to fight against these people. So we go on and we have Delay and all the guys who are disguising themselves as these slaves, but they're not. So that way they can turn around and eventually have this plan of having these Manocs who are dragging these certain stones up this incline, to have them at one point scare one of the mammoths to kind of bum rush and trying to trample over all the bad guys, all the guys that are against them. And that's their master plan, to have all the mammoths just kind of do this, like all rushing all at one to try to trample all over the bad guys to hope that that will kill them all off. That's their master plan. So we have all these guys go on, and they're starting to look like they're building up this pyramid, but then all of a sudden they're starting to like put like pieces apart from these mammoths. And so we have it to where Karen is to start fighting off all of these bad guys, so that way Delay can go on and scare this mammoth enough to where he can go on and have this Mamek try to bum rush all these guys. We also, sadly, in this story, had Tick Tick die also, because Tick Tick was fighting off some of these guards after Delay and all his people were to sneak in to talk to all the slaves, and Tick Tick was to fight off all these guards, and one of them stabbed into him and he died, sadly enough. So that's why he's not in the battle sequence towards the end here. So Delay finally used to stab into this Mamek. The Mamek is to bum rush and start running down this this incline, and so now all the Mameks are starting to wall run and trample through all these guys, through all these guards with all these whips. Like, that's how you can tell it's a bad guy technically in this movie, by whoever has the whip that's whipping people. Those are the bad guys. This also kind of feels like Year One with Michael Cera and Jack Black. It's basically kind of like the same movie, hence why I would probably just go on and just be like, yeah, this doesn't feel any different than stuff that I've kind of already seen. But so, we also have the almighty guy, who was to find out that Evelyn was to be special, because on her hand was to be these certain marks that was to make her to be chosen, because her marks align with the sky, and I guess that these marks are birthmarks, and since they tie to some correlation, she has to be special. So the Almighty was to collect this girl, because it's like, oh no, you're not going to be a slave anymore. You're going to go on, and you're going to be like here with me, and you're going to serve the gods. So now Delay is to have killed off most of the bad guys, and now he's making it to where the Almighty is. And so now they're having this bargain. So the Almighty with his forces are to go on and tell Delay, it's like, well, hey, like, you know what, you can keep all of the slaves that you had just saved here, you can take all of them, but I'm going to keep Evelyn and a certain number of people that's very, like, meat and potatoes. Like, I'm just going to keep them here. And we have Delay, who's like, no. Like, I'm just going to overthrow you. And Delay starts it out with grabbing the spear and chucking it at the Almighty, killing him. And he's like, hey, like, these guys aren't gods. Let's go on and just murder all of them. So we then go through and have Delay, who's taking what is left of his white spear, and is going on and fighting through all these guys, and they end up just knocking through all of them, taking them all down, and so now we just have it to where Delay gets what he wants, and we have the Warlord that is just kind of ticked that Delay is getting what he wants. So the Warlord is to go on with this bow and shoot it and hit Evelyn in the back, because he also wanted this girl for himself, and he was mentioning that he was going to have this girl for himself, but then people stepped in and were like, oh no, like, you're not going to get this girl, like, there's something about her, sorry. So now that the Warlord couldn't get it, he didn't want Delay to get this woman, and so he shoots her with this arrow to get to shoot her in the back. She falls over. Delay's like, no! And so now Delay goes on to stab the Warlord in the chest and kills him. And now Delay has to realize that he's going to lose the one love of his life. but then all of a sudden the old mother is to give up her life so that way all of a sudden Evelyn can somehow live. And so all of a sudden Evelyn is assumed to be dead, but then all of a sudden it seems that we get some white smoke coming into Evelyn's mouth, saying that I guess she's going to re-get her spirit back and she'll be fine. So that's how the movie is to end, with a forcible happy ending, and eventually like the good guys somehow win, if they are technically the good guys in this story. So with that said, that kind of covers most of this film. We also had a moment where when Delay was talking to the guys when they were enslaved, he meets one of the guys that they found that was blind, and the guy that was blind was to have the same bone bracelet that Delay's father was to have. And so it's like, well, hey, what happened to like the guy that was wearing that bone bracelet? It's like, oh, that guy was buried. So come to find out, Delay's father was killed or was dead somehow or another. And so we go on and we have it to where I guess Delay gets closure on what happened to his father. It would have been nice if Delay's dad would have just been working in that place, and like he's kind of just like on his last legs and he's going to die anyways, but that'd be a cool closure moment, but that never happened. So we just go on and have it to where Delay is to kind of lose all of his dads in this movie. So with that said, I think that covers most of this film. At the end of the day, again, just a bad film. I'm sorry I had to keep kind of coming back to things because I kind of like forgot about them. I'm like, oh yeah, I should cover this piece. I should cover that piece. Because there's always this going back, and plus once I also get back, once I get to the ending of the movie, I want to just kind of figure out if there's anything that I forgot about, and that's what kind of happened. And I just kind of kept going back to things, and then eventually I'm like, okay, now we can get to the big battle. Now we can finish up. So with that said, goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.